What's the worst thing your sibling ever did that you secretly understood? Hotel security called our parents at 2 in the morning to say I was smashing something in the parking garage. When they arrived, I was standing over the shattered pieces of my sister's antique wedding car, the vintage roadster she'd rented for the ceremony, a tire iron still in my hand, and the fuel line cut. My sister Renee showed up in her robe, and the sound she made wasn't human. That car was a family heirloom, restored, worth a fortune. Her wedding was in 11 hours. I stood there shaking, saying the same thing over and over. I had to. Renee screamed that I was sick, that I'd ruined everything. My parents looked at me like I was broken, and the guard reached for his phone. Nobody asked why. They assumed my anxiety had finally tipped into something dangerous. Exactly what her fiancé, Damon, had been warning them about for months. They drove me home in silence and sent me to my room while Damon told them downstairs that I needed to be committed. I heard every word. She's obsessed. She can't stand Renee being happy. Renee had barely spoken to me in months because Damon had slowly cut me out of her life. At 6 a.m., I went to the attic before anyone could stop me. I dragged out the file box I'd been building and laid everything on the floor. The printouts, the news clippings, the insurance records. My mom found me there and something in my face made her call everyone up. I spread it across the coffee table. Damon's first wife, married dead 10 months later in a single car crash on an empty road. His fiancée before Renee, engaged, killed in a brake failure 3 weeks before their wedding. A girlfriend years back, dead in a rollover. Every one of them I'd learned had been driving a vehicle Damon had lovingly restored as a gift. Then I showed them the photos I'd taken 2 nights earlier, when I'd snuck into the garage where the wedding car was kept. The brake line, scored nearly through, a fresh cut in the steering coupling, tools that were his, left on the bench. Renee stared at the photos, then at Damon. Why would Mia make this up? His face went red. Because she's jealous. She's sick. But his voice cracked, and my father heard it. Renee was already walking to the door. She said she wanted to check something at his apartment. Damon moved to stop her. My dad blocked him. 40 minutes later, she came back holding a folder she'd found taped behind a drawer. She dropped it on the table, and it fell open. Pages in Damon's handwriting. Notes on each woman. Dates. Insurance payout amounts. He'd mapped the whole thing out before he ever proposed. My mom read one line aloud. Anniversary is cleanest. Grief covers the timeline. My dad called the police immediately. When the officers arrived, one recognized Damon's name and stepped outside to make a call. He came back and told us Damon's first wife's death had been investigated years ago, but never proven. Now, he said, they'd be reopening it. Days later, they got a warrant for a storage unit in Damon's name. Inside, they found more files, tools, and a laptop with searches on staging accidents and on the exact insurance policies he'd taken out on each woman, including a new one on Renee, dated the week they got engaged. That evening, the detective told us Damon had a pattern going back over a decade. Marry or get engaged, insure, arrange a tragic accident, collect, move on. He'd already scheduled the wedding car's final servicing for the morning of the ceremony. Renee would have driven away from her own wedding in a car built to fail on the highway. They arrested him for the murder of his first wife, plus fraud and attempted harm charges for what he'd planned for my sister. Renee came to my room that night and hugged me so hard I couldn't breathe. She kept whispering, "I'm sorry, I should have listened." I told her about the 6 weeks I'd spent unable to sleep, obsessively pulling public records after I overheard Damon on the phone with an insurance agent, using her name and a number she knew nothing about. That was the thread I'd started pulling. We cried together until the sun came up. I know how it looked. The girl with the anxiety disorder, destroying her sister's wedding in the middle of the night. For one whole terrible hour, everyone I loved believed I was the dangerous one. But some part of me had known. The way he watched her. The gifts that were always vehicles. The way he isolated her from the one person paranoid enough to check. Renee didn't get married that day. She got to keep being alive instead. And these days when she can't sleep, she calls me. And I always pick up.